Good afternoon. This is Casey Johnson. This is my presentation for the comparison of long-term care for public and private funding. Some of the facts that I came up with for public long-term care is the two major funding for public non public long-term care is Medicare, Medicaid. Every elderly person is eligible for Medicare for doctor's visits, but it's a little limited as far as for long-term care. And I also saw in another source that the long-term care is usually about 22 days that it pays for. It does cover a lot of the medical expenses as far as going to the doctor and medication, but as far as long-term care, it's limited to certain elderly individuals. Medicaid actually helps more with long-term care than Medicare does. And that varies from state to state, and it does have a joint for both state and federal funding. Facts on private long-term care. Private care does have some help from Medicare and Medicaid, but it does not pay a lot for private funding facilities for long-term care because it's so expensive. A lot of it has to be based on your own money, as far as like checking savings, and other options are reverse mortgages, trust funds, and amenities. There also are options for SSI care for the private sector, and you can also use healthcare insurance, which a lot of times you may not be working to get healthcare insurance, but you maybe have to use other sources of healthcare. The only thing that I did find that was in common for both, that we do have assistance from both Medicare and Medicaid, but it does vary from both public and private. How they differ. Of course, the major source for public is Medicare and Medicaid, and there are some assistance from Medicare and Medicaid, but it is not nearly enough to pay for private funding because it is very expensive. For public funding, they don't ask for any additional income needed as far as mortgages and trust funds or any other insurance or anything, because it's basically through public government funding. So they try to use exactly what's out there through government, and that's Medicare and Medicaid, and it's not as expensive as the private funding facilities. Private funding, of course, they have other options you can use to pay, and that is trust funds, mortgages. You can even take out other loans on your home through the bank and other things. And they don't have a lot of rules and regulations through government funding because they don't really get a lot of government funding. And the faith-based long-term care facilities, they have representations of all denominations that I included: Roman Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, and non-denominational. They provide transportation for the care takers to be able to either pick up their loved ones to go to church, or either they have transportation provided to take them to church. They have ministers, preachers, rabbis, depending on their faith, to come in and share their faith. And also, if there anyone there during the last few hours of their life that need prayer, they're there to help them through that transition. And of course, most faith-based long-term care facilities are considered privately owned because sometimes the government doesn't get really involved with church and state. So that is my presentation for my private and public long-term care, and thank you for listening.